The world watches with bated breath. The year is 2025. Decades of escalating tensions simmer beneath the surface of global politics. A tapestry of treaties fray, alliances once steadfast begin to crumble, resources dwindle, populations surge. Fear, the oldest enemy of reason, whispers its poison into the ears of nations. The unthinkable, once a distant nightmare, edges closer to reality. In smoke-filled rooms, behind closed doors, the architects of power make their moves. Each decision a gamble, a roll of the dice with the fate of billions hanging in the balance. The world holds its breath. The drums of war, faint at first, begin to beat a little louder, a little closer. Explosions shatter the fragile peace. The nightmare scenario, once a whisper, roars to life. World War III erupts, not with a whimper, but with the earth-shuddering force of 1,000 storms. Familiar maps become obsolete, redrawn in the blood of nations. Cities, once symbols of progress and human endeavor, are transformed into battle-scarred landscapes. The old world order collapses, consumed by the fires of conflict. Alliances shift like desert sands, driven by desperation and the cold calculus of survival. In the crucible of war, humanity is tested as never before. The very fabric of civilization strains under the weight of unimaginable violence and loss. This is not our world, not yet, but it is a world eerily familiar, a reflection of our darkest fears and the ever-present potential for self-destruction that haunts the human story. In this alternate timeline, we confront the consequences of our collective failures, the breakdown of diplomacy, the triumph of fear over reason, the willingness to wager the future on the gamble of war. This is a story of loss and resilience, of courage and despair, of the enduring human spirit tested in the face of unimaginable darkness. It is a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the high cost of hatred, but it is also a story of hope, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to seek a better tomorrow, even amidst the ruins of yesterday. Europe, once a tapestry woven from centuries of conflict and fragile peace, becomes the tinderbox for a new global conflagration. The seeds of resentment, sown in the aftermath of past wars, take root in the fertile ground of economic uncertainty and resurgent nationalism. The old wounds, never fully healed, reopen. Mistrust festers between East and West, fueled by propaganda and the ghosts of history. The language of diplomacy, once a tool for bridge building, devolves into a weapon of accusation and threat. In the spring of 2025, as the world watches with a mixture of apprehension and morbid fascination, the unthinkable happens. A border skirmish, a miscalculation, a spark in the darkness, the exact catalyst is lost in the fog of war, ignites the powder keg. The drums of war, silent for generations, resume their ominous beat, echoing across the continent and sending tremors of fear around the globe. The iron harvest begins. Section 2, Flashpoint, the Baltic. The Baltic Sea, once a vital artery of commerce and cultural exchange, becomes a cauldron of conflict. NATO and Russian forces, poised on a knife's edge for years, collide with the force of a hurricane. The small nations caught in the crossfire, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, become battlegrounds, their independence sacrificed on the altar of superpower ambition. Civilians caught in the maelstrom flee their homes, seeking refuge in a world rapidly spiraling into chaos. The cyber realm, once a playground for commerce and communication, transforms into a virtual battlefield. Critical infrastructure crumbles under the relentless assault of state-sponsored hackers. Misinformation spreads like wildfire, eroding trust and fanning the flames of hatred. The old rules of engagement, forged in the crucible of the 20th century, are rewritten in real time. Hybrid warfare, a sinister blend of conventional military might, cyber attacks and information warfare, becomes the new normal. Section 3. Shock and awe, terror and resistance. The initial onslaught is swift and brutal. Russian forces, employing a strategy of shock and awe, surge westward, overwhelming their adversaries with a combination of raw firepower and technological superiority. NATO, caught off guard by the ferocity of the attack, scrambles to respond. Reinforcements pour into Europe, but the logistical challenges are immense. The Atlantic Ocean, once a protective moat, becomes a vast and vulnerable supply line, but the human spirit, when confronted with annihilation, often finds reserves of strength and resilience. Ordinary citizens, thrust into extraordinary circumstances, take up arms alongside their professional counterparts. A fierce resistance movement emerges from the ashes of shattered cities, fueled by a burning desire to defend their homelands and a deep-seated hatred for the invaders. Section 4. The Bear Awakens. In the heart of Russia, a nation accustomed to hardship and sacrifice steels itself for a long and bitter struggle. The Kremlin, its propaganda machine working overtime, paints the conflict as a defensive war, a necessary response to NATO aggression. The Russian people, bombarded with a constant stream of patriotic rhetoric and carefully curated news, rally behind their leader. Old enmities resurface, fueling a wave of nationalism not seen since the darkest days of the Cold War. The Russian military, hardened by years of conflict in Syria and Ukraine, fights with grim determination. Their tactics, honed in the unforgiving crucible of urban warfare, prove devastatingly effective. As the conflict drags on, both sides find themselves locked in a deadly embrace, a grinding war of attrition that threatens to consume the continent. Section 5. A house divided. Within NATO, the strain of war begins to tell. The alliance forged in the aftermath of World War II finds its unity tested as never before. Some member states, fearing escalation and the spectre of nuclear war, urge restraint, favouring diplomacy over a full-scale military response. Others, haunted by the ghosts of appeasement, demand a more forceful approach, arguing that any sign of weakness will be interpreted as a victory for the aggressor. Public opinion, initially supportive of a strong response, begins to waver as the casualty reports mount and the economic consequences of the war hit home. The world watches, holding its breath, as the fate of Europe and perhaps the world hangs in the balance. The first act of this global tragedy has only just begun, and the worst is yet to come. Section 1. The Atlantic Wall crumbles. The Atlantic Ocean, once a seemingly insurmountable barrier protecting North America, becomes a watery graveyard. Russian submarines, lurking beneath the waves, launch a surprise attack on NATO naval forces. The sinking of a United States aircraft carrier, a potent symbol of American military might, sends shockwaves through the nation. The unthinkable has happened. The continental United States, long considered invulnerable to foreign attack, is now a battleground. Panic grips the nation as news of the attack spreads like wildfire. The stock market crashes, erasing trillions in wealth and plunging the global economy into chaos. The president, addressing a nation paralyzed by fear and disbelief, vows swift and decisive retaliation. America, he declares, will not be intimidated. The fight has come to their shores, and they will meet it with unwavering resolve. Section 2. Fear and Loathing in the Land of the Free. The initial shock gives way to a chilling new reality. The familiar rhythms of American life, baseball games, shopping malls, school plays, are replaced by the chilling routines of war. Cities across the country implement blackout procedures. Air raid sirens, silent for generations, wail their mournful song. Citizens huddle around radios and televisions, desperate for news, clinging to hope even as the world seems to crumble around them. The fabric of American society, already strained by political polarization and economic inequality, begins to fray. Suspicion and paranoia run rampant. Neighbors turn against neighbors, fueled by fear and the insidious whispers of propaganda. The very values that have long defined America, freedom, democracy, the rule of law, are put to the ultimate test as the nation confronts an enemy determined to destroy its way of life. Los Angeles, the city of dreams, becomes a nightmare landscape. Russian bombers, having penetrated American airspace, target strategic infrastructure power grids, communication networks, military installations. The iconic Hollywood sign, once a symbol of glamour and escapism, is reduced to rubble. The beaches, once thronged with sunbathers and surfers, are deserted, patrolled by armed soldiers on edge, wary of further attacks. Amidst the chaos and destruction, stories of incredible courage and resilience emerge. First responders, working tirelessly amidst the rubble, pull survivors from collapsed buildings. Ordinary citizens, thrust into extraordinary circumstances, risk their lives to help their neighbors, proving that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can shine through. As the war drags on, a new generation of Americans comes of age. Too young to remember a time before the bombs fell, they have known nothing but conflict, loss, and sacrifice. They are the children of war, hardened by hardship, their innocence shattered by the horrors they have witnessed. But they are also a generation united by a common purpose, to defend their homeland and preserve the flickering flame of freedom. They fight not for glory or conquest, but for survival, for the hope of a better future, a world free from the tyranny and oppression that have engulfed their lives. In the crucible of war, America undergoes a profound transformation. The old divisions, political, social, economic, fade in the face of a common enemy. A new sense of national unity emerges, forged in the fires of shared sacrifice and the enduring belief that even in the darkest of nights, dawn will eventually come. As the conflict rages, echoing across the globe, the world watches in horror. The lessons of the 20th century, the hard-won wisdom purchased with the blood of millions, seem to have been forgotten. The ghosts of wars past, Verdun, Stalingrad, Hiroshima, haunt the battlefields of the present. The world stands on a precipice, teetering on the brink of annihilation, as the destructive power of modern warfare threatens to extinguish the very flame of civilization. The world holds its breath, praying for a miracle, a flicker of hope in the gathering darkness. But the path to peace, always treacherous, seems more elusive than ever. The fate of humanity hangs in the balance, suspended between the horrors of the present and the uncertain promise of the future. Moscow, the heart of Russia, its white walls and golden domes gleaming under a sky choked with smoke, becomes a city under siege. The familiar rhythms of life, the bustling crowds in Red Square, the laughter of children playing in Gorky Park, the mournful strains of opera echoing from the Bolshoi Theatre, are silenced by the relentless thunder of artillery. The Kremlin, once a symbol of unyielding power, its red star, a beacon of communist ideology, now hunkers down under a shroud of anti-aircraft fire. A fortress bracing for an onslaught that could shatter the nation's soul. Gone are the tourists and the lovers strolling hand in hand. In their place, columns of weary soldiers march through the streets, their faces hardened by combat, their eyes reflecting the horrors they have witnessed. The citizens of Moscow, accustomed to hardship and privation, their ancestors having endured revolution, famine and war, dig deep into their reserves of resilience, preparing to defend their city street by bloody street. Deep in the Ural Mountains, far from the front lines, the industrial heart of Russia beats on. Factories operate around the clock, their furnaces blazing, workers toiling tirelessly. Women and children take their places on assembly lines, their hands calloused, spirits unbroken. The fate of the nation rests on their shoulders. The people of Russia refuse to yield. They will fight for their homeland, for their families, until their dying breath. The war, a crucible of unimaginable violence and destruction, forges a new generation of Russians. Young men and women find themselves thrust into the maelstrom, their childhood dreams shattered. They learn to fire rifles before they learn to drive, to bandage wounds before they can tend to a broken heart. They witness horrors that would break a weaker spirit, endure hardships that would crush a lesser will. But they do not break. They do not surrender to despair. They are bound together by the shared experience of war, a bond forged in blood and fire, stronger than any ideology or political affiliation. They are fighting for their comrades in arms, for the soldier next to them in the trench, for the nurse who bandages their wounds, for the pilot who risks their life to provide air cover. They are fighting for something more than territory or ideology. They are fighting for their humanity, for the right to determine their own destiny, for the hope of a future where their children will not have to endure the horrors they have witnessed. The ghosts of past wars, particularly Stalingrad, loom large over the present battlefields. The memory of that brutal struggle, a clash that left a city in ruins and claimed over 1 million lives, serves as both a warning and an inspiration. The Russian people understand the true cost of war. They know victory comes at an unimaginable price, but they have faced insurmountable odds before and emerged victorious. As the war grinds on year after bloody year, the world watches with a mixture of horror and a strange, morbid fascination. The conflict, once confined to the battlefields of Europe, has now engulfed the globe, casting a long shadow over every corner of the planet. The global economy lies in ruins, shattered by sanctions, blockades, and the sheer destructive power of modern warfare. Climate change, once a distant threat, accelerates at an alarming pace, exacerbated by the environmental devastation wrought by the conflict. Yet, even amidst the darkness, even as the world teeters on the brink of annihilation, a flicker of hope remains. In the bombed-out cities and ravaged countrysides, ordinary people perform extraordinary acts of courage and compassion. Doctors and nurses work tirelessly to save lives, their own safety often at risk. Teachers continue to educate their students, even as bombs fall around them. Artists and musicians use their talents to offer solace and hope, reminding the world that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit endures. Ukraine, a land steeped in history, a bridge between East and West, finds itself at the epicenter of a global storm. Its fertile plains, once known as the breadbasket of Europe, are now scarred by trenches and littered with the debris of war. Its cities, vibrant centers of culture and commerce, bear the brunt of a relentless assault, their streets transformed into battlegrounds, their buildings reduced to rubble. But amidst the devastation, a spirit of defiance burns bright, a refusal to bow to tyranny, a determination to fight for every inch of their homeland. Ukraine becomes the crucible where the fate of nations is forged, the testing ground for new weapons and old hatreds. Its people, caught in the crossfire of empires, endure unimaginable suffering. Yet their spirit remains unbroken. They are fighting not just for their own survival, but for the very soul of their nation, for the right to determine their own destiny, for a future free from the shackles of oppression. They are fighting for the hope of a better tomorrow for themselves and for generations to come. Section 2. A city defiant, Kyiv under fire. Kyiv, the ancient capital of Ukraine, a city of golden domes and cobblestone streets, becomes a symbol of resistance in the face of overwhelming odds. Russian forces, their advance slowed but not halted by the fierce defense put up by Ukrainian troops and citizen soldiers, lay siege to the city. Artillery fire rains down on residential neighborhoods, reducing apartment buildings to rubble. Hospitals and schools, once sanctuaries of healing and learning, are targeted, their destruction a grim testament to the brutality of war. Yet, even as the bombs fall and the city burns, the spirit of Kyiv remains unbroken. Citizens, armed with whatever weapons they can scavenge, join forces with the military, setting up ambushes, taking out enemy tanks, and making the invaders pay dearly for every inch of ground. The subway system, once a bustling artery of urban life, becomes a subterranean city, a refuge for thousands seeking shelter from the relentless bombardment. In the depths of the earth, amidst the darkness and the fear, a sense of community prevails, a shared determination to endure, to resist, to survive. Section 3. The Sunflower and the Rifle. Across Ukraine, a nation of farmers and poets, teachers and artists takes up arms. Ordinary citizens, their lives upended by the invasion, transform themselves into warriors, their courage fueled by a fierce love for their homeland and a deep-seated hatred for the invaders. Grandfathers who once fought the Nazis in the forests of western Ukraine now share their knowledge of guerrilla warfare with their grandchildren, a grim inheritance passed down through generations. Women, their faces etched with worry but their eyes burning with resolve, sew camouflage nets and bake bread for the soldiers on the front lines, their every action a testament to the strength and resilience of the Ukrainian spirit. The sunflower, a symbol of Ukraine's agricultural bounty, takes on a new meaning in wartime, representing not just nourishment for the body, but also hope for the future, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, life finds a way. Section 4. Echoes of a Forgotten Genocide. For the Ukrainian people, the Russian invasion evokes painful memories of the Holodomor, the man-made famine engineered by Stalin's regime in the 1930s that claimed the lives of millions of Ukrainians. The current conflict, with its echoes of that dark chapter in history, is seen by many Ukrainians not just as a war of aggression, but as an existential struggle, a fight for the very survival of their nation and their culture. The world watches in horror as images of mass graves and devastated cities emerge from Ukraine, evoking comparisons to the darkest days of the 20th century. The ghosts of past atrocities haunt the present, a chilling reminder of the fragility of peace and the enduring capacity for human cruelty. But amidst the darkness, the spirit of resistance burns bright. The Ukrainian people, their history marked by both tragedy and resilience, refuse to be broken. They are determined to honor the memory of their ancestors by fighting for their freedom, for their right to exist, for a future where such horrors will never again be allowed to happen. As the war drags on, year after bloody year, the Ukrainian people, tempered by hardship and united by a common purpose, undergo a profound transformation. They emerge from the crucible of conflict stronger, more resilient, more determined than ever before. The old divisions that once plagued Ukrainian society, linguistic, regional, political, fade in the face of a common enemy. A new sense of national unity emerges, forged in the fires of shared sacrifice and the enduring belief in a better future for their children and grandchildren. The world, initially caught off guard by the ferocity of the Russian invasion, rallies to Ukraine's side, providing military aid, humanitarian assistance, and a platform for the Ukrainian people to share their stories of courage and resilience. The Ukrainian spirit, defiant and unyielding, becomes a beacon of hope in a world teetering on the brink of despair. It is a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to resist tyranny, to fight for freedom, and to rebuild even amidst the ruins. India, a land of ancient wisdom and burgeoning modernity, a nation grappling with its own internal complexities, watches the unfolding global conflict with a sense of cautious detachment. The horrors unfolding thousands of miles away seem at first like a distant storm, a tragedy to be mourned but not a crisis, demanding their direct involvement. The Indian government, adhering to its long-standing policy of non-alignment, walks a diplomatic tightrope, condemning the violence but refusing to take sides. India, with its vast population, its growing economy, and its strategic location at the crossroads of Asia, becomes a coveted prize in the global power struggle. Both sides, desperate for allies, court India's favor, offering economic incentives and security guarantees in exchange for their support. The Indian government, acutely aware of the delicate balancing act required to navigate the treacherous currents of global politics, resists the pressure to choose sides. They maintain close ties with both the West, particularly the United States, and with Russia, a longtime ally and arms supplier. This policy of strategic ambiguity, while frustrating to those demanding a clear declaration of allegiance, allows India to preserve its autonomy and pursue its own national interests. They provide humanitarian aid to war-torn regions, offer refuge to those displaced by the conflict, and use their influence on the global stage to call for a peaceful resolution to the crisis. But as the war drags on, the pressure on India to take sides intensifies, and the line between neutrality and complicity becomes increasingly blurred. The war, like a virus, spreads its tendrils across the globe, disrupting supply chains, destabilizing economies, and exacerbating existing tensions. India, despite its best efforts to remain insulated from the conflict, soon feels the ripple effects. The global energy market, thrown into turmoil by sanctions and sabotage, sends shockwaves through the Indian economy. The cost of essential commodities skyrockets, fueling inflation and social unrest. The flow of refugees fleeing the fighting in Europe and elsewhere strains India's already stretched resources. The government, facing mounting criticism from both those demanding they do more to help and those who fear the influx of foreigners, struggles to find a balance between compassion and pragmatism. The war, once a distant concern, now casts a long shadow over India, forcing them to confront the uncomfortable reality that neutrality, while a noble aspiration, often comes at a price. China, a sleeping giant awakened, observes the unfolding global conflict with a mixture of caution and opportunity. The war, while devastating for many, presents China with a chance to assert its growing power and reshape the geopolitical landscape to its advantage. They provide economic and military aid to Russia, circumventing Western sanctions and bolstering their strategic partnership. China's expansionist ambitions, long a source of concern for its neighbors, take on a new urgency in the context of the global power vacuum created by the war. They increase their military presence in the South China Sea, asserting their territorial claims and challenging the United States' naval dominance in the region. As the war enters its third year, the world has been irrevocably transformed. The old order, with its fragile alliances and established power structures, lies in ruins. In its place, a new and uncertain world is emerging, one defined by shifting alliances, multipolar power centers, and the constant threat of conflict. India, its policy of non-alignment strained but not broken by the pressures of war, finds itself at a crossroads. The decisions they make in the coming years will have far-reaching consequences, not only for their own nation, but for the future of the world. (2028), the year the world hoped for, prayed for, but almost dared not believe in. After 3 years of unimaginable brutality, a ceasefire, fragile as spun glass, descends upon the ravaged battlefield. The cost of the conflict is staggering. Millions lie dead, victims of bombs, bullets, and the insidious creep of famine and disease that follow in war's wake. Entire cities are reduced to rubble, monuments to humanity's capacity for self-destruction. In grand halls once teeming with diplomats and dignitaries, now bearing the scars of conflict, weary negotiators gather. Their faces, etched with exhaustion and the weight of the decisions made, reflect the years of bloodshed. A treaty, its ink stained with the blood of millions, is signed. It is not a treaty of victors and vanquished, for in this war there are no true victors, only survivors. It is a treaty born of exhaustion, of the realization that the only alternative to peace is utter annihilation. The guns fall silent, but the echoes of war reverberate long after the last shot is fired. The world, forever scarred by the conflict, struggles to come to terms with the enormity of the loss and the uncertainty of the future. Millions remain displaced, their homes destroyed, their families torn apart. The lucky ones find refuge in overcrowded camps, their lives on hold, haunted by the trauma of their experiences. The physical wounds of war may heal, but the psychological scars run deep. Post-traumatic stress disorder, once a whisper in the corridors of military hospitals, becomes a silent epidemic, afflicting soldiers and civilians alike. The world, still reeling from the trauma of the recent past, must now confront the daunting task of rebuilding not just its infrastructure, but also the very fabric of trust and understanding that was so carelessly ripped apart. In the aftermath of the war, Memorials rise from the ashes, somber reminders of the cost of conflict. Stone monuments etched with the names of the fallen stand sentinel over mass graves, their silence a testament to the enormity of the loss. Museums filled with artifacts of war, shattered weapons, blood-stained uniforms, letters penned by soldiers on the eve of battle serve as repositories of memory, ensuring that the lessons of the past are not forgotten. But remembrance is not just about monuments and museums. It is about keeping alive the stories of those who lived through the conflict, those who fought and bled, those who lost loved ones, those who endured unimaginable hardships. It is about listening to their testimonies, learning from their experiences, and honoring their sacrifices by striving to create a world where such horrors are never repeated. World War III is a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the power of fear. It forces us to confront our capacity for both good and evil, but it also offers hope, a testament to human resilience and compassion. The future remains unwritten. The choice is ours.